Welcome to All Things Moore County, Moore County's weekly radio show highlighting the many facets of the Sandhills. That includes real estate, lifestyle, community and neighborhoods. And now from 4 Properties, here's your host, Bill Sahadi.
Good morning and welcome to the talk show, All Things Moore County. Dorothy, we've been doing this long enough now that I can look back and say, we have a guest revisiting us who has actually been on the show 3 or 4 times over the years, because now we have a little bit of a history.
A little history? We got a lot of history.
We got a lot of history. Well, I'm talking about Pinehurst resident, Moore County resident, Dr. Jolene Erlocker, who is an author, a speaker, a coach, a mentor, and she has been on the show in the past over the years talking about intergenerational issues, leadership strategies, coaching for who would her listeners be? Parents, the students themselves, but always discussing strategies for a new generation. Think about the last 10 or 15 years. Just think about the demographic shifts in Moore County. How many changes are going on? Jolene, I think when you were first on, your children were 2. They're now 9 or 10.
Yes.
They're adorable.
Thank you.
I mean, they are just precious. We're going to be talking about some of these strategies today, but we're also going to be talking about, in particular, the importance of fathers for kids and communities to thrive, and how the role of fathers aids in leadership development. Since you were first on the show, I've always gotten emails from you. I look at every one of them, but every once in a while I sit back and I go, this one, and it made me want to reach out because I don't think about why I do it. If I have a thought, I just act. And my instinct was to just reach out, and I did, and I spoke to Barbie.
Yes.
Okay. And then I had another thought. I wanted to introduce you to Kayla, Kayla Besh, who is the owner of Gingerly Media Marketing, who has worked with us at 4 Properties, and is a very impressive lady. Does marketing primarily, but has a very varied background, and she's a mother of 2. And I thought, Kayla, between you and I, we can engage Jolene in a rigorous conversation. You have 2 children, ages 5 and 3?
Yes.
As of today, your son is 5.
Yes.
Today's his birthday?
Yesterday was his birthday.
Is that right?
It was. We had a little celebration at home for him, and his big party is this Saturday.
So it's interesting. You talk about, Jolene, leadership development. Kayla is trying to help companies and businesses with their leadership strategies. But in this age of social media, we want to be organic. We don't want to become so electric and so timely that there's so much information out there. What you do, you write, you coach, you teach, it's much more organic, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is, because it's just responding to needs as they come up. And I've had my company now for almost 10 years, and it's really changed over that time regarding what the needs are and how people are engaging with this information, just because of those trends you mentioned, the changing demographics. Social media technology are changing how we engage, how we communicate, our expectations.
How many painkillers we have to take.
Yes, especially, when we think about our kids, teenagers, and young adults who have been impacted.
Yeah. You wrote a book called Millennials in Ministry. You also wrote a book, Godly Leadership in an Ungodly Culture. That's pretty catchy. And you have a 3rd book coming out, Mobilizing Gen Z for Missions. That's being released sometime this year?
Yeah, August 8th. So we're just a couple weeks away from that book launch.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Leading Tomorrow is you started in 2014. Talk a little bit about the inspiration and the mission and how it's evolved in those, 8 years ago.
Well, before I married my military spouse, I taught at a university, and really just seeing how college students were changing, how their struggles, their challenges, their goals were different than even my generation, which I'm a Gen Xer, at that time was Millennials,
Right.
really propelled me into studying generational trends, to just really understand how do I equip the students that I'm working with better, and how do I gain strategies and implement methods that are going to work for them? How do I teach them well? We're seeing a lot of young people who are struggling in the workplace at that time, and we continue to see some of those struggles today, now with Gen Z. So that's what propelled me into it initially. I started doing research, did my doctoral dissertation on millennials at the time. And then because of that, I just started speaking and doing some consulting just on the side. So when I married a military man and had to make my career mobile, I just started kind of doing speaking, training, consulting, very part-time, and it has just grown over the last 8 years since I started to become really almost full-time now that I'm doing it while juggling the kids and all of that as well.
What is the age right now today of millennials? What range do they?
So millennials are actually getting kind of old.
Yeah, right. That's why I'm asking.
So they don't always like to admit it. But really, the oldest millennials are around 40, and the youngest are mid-20s. So Gen Z is really those mid-20-year-olds and younger. So that's a lot of who I'm talking about now is Gen Z, which are really our young adults, our teenagers, and really late elementary and middle school would be Gen Z right now.
So is it true that a lot of baby boomers, and what is right after baby boomers?
Gen X, so that's
Okay.
my generation,
Okay,
yes.
so is it true that a lot of baby boomers and Gen Xers would say that Gen Z, it's a softer generation, more entitled? Are you nodding your head yes, or are you saying, I can't believe you asked me that question on the air?
Well, I would say that most older generations have thought that of younger generations,
Oh, okay.
I think. And so, yes, I think baby boomers and Gen X would say that for
Okay.
sure. I think what sometimes gets lost in the conversation is that many of the struggles and pressures that Gen Z experiences are invisible to older generations. So I would say younger generations are actually more resilient than we realize because
Okay.
we don't understand some of the pressures and things that they're overcoming. By the same token, I would say we've created the world that has maybe caused them to be less resilient than older generations. And so that's a part of it as well. Yeah.
So, Kayla, that would put you as a millennial.
Actually, I'm not.
You're not.
I am not. Thank you, though.
Is that right?
I'm not. I'm Generation X.
Okay.
I am.
To me,
Surprise.
all right.
I think I'm on that border.
You're a cusper.
I am a cusper, but I identify way more with Gen X, and I think that's because of how my parents raised me,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Which parenting and education can make a big
Yes.
impact. Yeah.
So are Gen Z, are they more directed than they need to be? Do they need more leadership direction? My instinct tells me that you're saying yes, they do.
They do, in a sense, because they've grown up in a culture of safety where
Yeah.
we have promoted safety is first. You know, you drive onto any school campus and you say safety first is posted everywhere. So as a result of that, they're very used to people protecting them and guiding them.
Right.
We've had the helicopter and now the lawnmower parenting phenomena where we do a lot for kids, right? So as a result of that, they're not always prepared to like take initiative and do things on their own in the same way. So they really do need more directed leadership, but they have the potential to really take initiative and to thrive if they feel supported. So it's really finding that way of, as adults, not stepping in and doing everything for them, but letting them feel supported as we encourage and empower them to do some things on their own.
So between the two of you, I have a bunch of years on both of you, and I just want to tell you how I had my swimming lessons as a kid. My father just threw me in. He said, "Here, figure it out."
Sounds right.
He'd watch. If I didn't
Yeah.
drown, he was.
Yeah. Mhm.
Otherwise, he'd come in after me.
Yes.
Figure it out.
Yes.
I remember those tough love lessons, and I didn't like them at the time, but I look back now, and I'm appreciative for a bunch. He would allow me to have fights
Yes.
with kids. He said, "You started it, go finish it."
Yep. which taught you conflict resolution, right? And when you get thrown into
I majored in it.
But it's the reality. So often things like conflict resolution, problem solving, critical thinking, we do so much of it for kids, or their devices are doing it for them,
Right.
or we let their devices do it for them, that as a result of that, we've in some ways kind of created a scenario where kids have not been given the opportunity to realize, if I get thrown into the pool, I actually can swim, which gives you confidence. It gives you a sense of empowerment that I can do things. But today, we don't want kids to suffer. We don't want kids to feel pain. We don't want them to be uncomfortable. So we try to protect them. So Tim Elmore, who is a generational speaker as well, he often uses the example of a butterfly in a cocoon, right? That butterfly has to struggle to get out of the cocoon. But if you see a butterfly struggling to get out of a cocoon, what you want to do is rip the cocoon open and save them, right?
Yeah.
If you do that, though, they will never fly, because it's the struggle itself that strengthens their wings. And often with kids today, what we're doing is we're ripping the cocoon open. We're not actually letting them struggle. And I feel this as a mom. I don't know about you, Kayla.
No, I do.
It's hard. It's hard to let your kids struggle, but they need that struggle in order to thrive.
Right. What has softened the methods of the way parents are with kids these days? Why has it softened so much? Is it society? Are the dangers? I mean, I speak as a parent.
Yeah, speak, Kayla, because I'll talk from the research side, but I'd like to hear.
For me, it's
Kayla?
judgment of others, and now, you know, it's, if you hit a child, you're abusive, or if you punish in this way, that's wrong, it's damaging. I think that there's so much information out there that is misleading and putting us in different directions, and we feel so judged as parents that we tend to shy away from the methods of discipline that worked for us as children.
Right.
And I also think that we grew up wanting a better future or life for our children, and in one mind we think we're doing them a service by protecting them when we're not. And so I think it's several different.
Okay, Jolene, what does the research say?
Yeah, so I would say it shows what Kayla's saying as far as what social media and the internet have created as far as comparing ourselves, people criticizing you or judging you. I mean, no matter what you're doing with your child, we were talking about education a little bit before we got on the show here, and like, no matter what educational choice you choose for your child, some article or social media post is going to tell you that's the wrong thing. No matter what you choose to feed them, some social media post or article is going to tell you it's the wrong thing.
Right.
No matter what diapers you put them in, right? So it's the pressure, the competition, the comparison, the criticism is so prevalent because of our devices today. That puts a lot of pressure on parents. But two other things really impacted it, really starting in the 80s when millennials were growing up, was just high profile child abductions that got a lot of national attention and shifted the focus to protecting kids. That has really lingered with us ever since. Like, our job is to protect kids. Another thing was the shift to the self-esteem movement, because our generation, Gen Xers, we kind of grew up, with the generation of parents who were both working outside the home, higher divorce rates, all of those things. So we were a little bit abandoned in a sense. We were the latchkey generation. So we were a little rebellious and cynical at times. I don't know, Kayla, if you would say peers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Could
and
be that way. Yes, independent. And we were like, we're doing something wrong. We need to change the way we're parenting. And so we saw this shift in just overprotecting, being friends with kids, building their self-esteem, which shifted away from just the discipline and those things that Kayla was mentioning. So there's a number of factors that are really wrapped up in this. I also think there's a decrease in confidence among parents.
Yeah,
I agree. A lot of that is just, our own parenting experiences, or just, again, all of this information from culture that's causing us to question and second guess all of our decisions.
I remember as a child growing up in Brooklyn, New York, on Halloween, our parents would give us bags, and we'd go out in the dark, up and down the streets. Yep. We would even jump on the subway. We would come back, come home later. No, people felt safe. Yep. Today, Halloween, parents are in the street, in their cars, walking with the kids, deciding which home it's okay to go to. There are signals by the homes if the lights are on. Oh my! So
And
it's not as safe.
No, but the reality is that physically, kids are safer today than they have been for a long time. When you look statistically at the safety measures, the fact is we don't feel that way because we're inundated with information that tells us the world is unsafe.
Okay.
So when we start talking about things like anxiety and depression right now that kids are feeling, part of that, the world is not any less safe necessarily today than it ever has been. I mean, we were studying ancient empires this year in school, and I mean, it was a brutal, brutal environment, right? I mean, you look at things that are happening throughout history, the world has always had risk, but we today see it constantly, 24/7. Everything that might be happening anywhere in the world is being projected to us, and so we feel like the world is less safe, even though physically kids are actually safer today than they have been a long time. We have more medical care. We have safety, seats in the cars. We have, safety warnings on everything. So kids are actually, and the reality with things like child abductions, very few child abductions are happening where a kid's getting pulled out of a parking lot or a store like we would have thought about in the 80s, right? Yeah. Most child abductions are happening because kids are walking out their front door and getting in the car with the perpetrator because they built a relationship with them online while they were sitting in their bedroom. So as parents, we have to shift our mentality of how we're protecting our kids. Our kids need more protection in the sense of how they're accessing technology, how we're engaging them emotionally and mentally. And we have so focused on physical safety that we've overprotected them in some ways and now underprotected them in others. And it's resulted in a lot of the dynamics we're seeing today.
The underlying message seems to be that all this information that we get is not good, this overload.
It is. Psychologically, we're not equipped to handle it all.
Yeah.
And often what it leaves us is emotionally exhausted for the things we actually need to deal with in our immediate life because we're processing all the things that are happening in the whole world.
What about when we come back in the second set, I remember children today don't have to wait till Monday to go back to school to find out what happened over the weekend because it's all electronic. So they get immediate information about how they're going to feel.
Yeah.
Friday we left school. Monday we came back and caught up on all the news. See, I was born when Jesus was in 3rd grade, and it is so different today. Kids are getting all this immediate feedback. We will talk about that, and we want to talk about the father's role in the children's self-esteem and why it's so vital. Dr. Jolene Erlocker is our guest for the entire hour. This is All Things Moore County. We'll be right back. Welcome back to All Things Moore County. Our guest for the hour is Dr. Jolene Erlocker. She is a writer, an author, a mentor, a coach. She sees the world with a vision that is good for us to look at these days because we have to examine why we are where we are and how we get from here to there. Jolene, in the first set, we were talking about kids today, parents protecting them for safety, even though the statistics don't bear that out. But do you get involved also with the children's teachers, either as a consultant, as a coach? Is it because are they doing the same thing?
Yeah, so I do teach grad courses for K-12 teachers, and I also do training for teachers on just trends that we're seeing with kids today. And I think it's really interesting because we were talking about parenting earlier, and really the relationship between schools and parents, I think, is so, so critical today. Because, often teachers are feeling all the pressures of parent expectations,
Right.
and parents are felt tied to what they see as like the requirements of the school. And so whether that's regarding, technology or meeting students' needs or some of the mental and emotional health issues that kids are facing today, I think there's a lot of just need for good communication between teachers and parents, clear expectations just on how do we serve students well, not overprotect them. Sometimes teachers don't feel like they can challenge or push kids too much in their learning because then parents might call,
Right.
might complain,
Right.
that type of thing. So I think we're really in a situation where how do we as adults in our communities really support kids while also challenging and empowering them?
Right. And is it a very simple answer?
No, well, Kayla, I would be curious. You have a 5-year-old, you said,
Yes.
so you're kind of entering the educational, experience. What are some of your thoughts with just parenting and education and the intersection?
Well, I'd have to agree that there is a lot of push on the teachers, especially in situations where there are some shortcomings at home. So I see where some of those parents tend to rely on teachers for more of that support than to kind of make up the gap.
Yes, I would say teachers that I talk to or taking my classes often feel like they're parenting as well as teaching. They often feel like they're needing to provide, mental and emotional health support to kids. And they often feel like with all those demands, they're unable to actually serve kids and teach them. So
I think that, and this is again just because I am inundated with all of the information out there, but I've also seen where teachers might be a little apprehensive to reprimand or, kind of set a child
Absolutely.
in a straight, so to speak,
Yep.
because they are afraid of the repercussions from the parents or the community.
Yes. And we've empowered kids a lot today. We have, if a child comes home from school and says they got in trouble for something, a teacher
I
did.
want to know what they did.
Discipline them, right. Back in the day when Gen X and Boomers were growing up, we would have gotten punished at school and we would have gotten punished at home because we got punished at school,
Yep.
Right.
right? So there
Yep.
was consistency a little bit more in the community in how we were going to engage kids. Today, we live in a culture of blame where when something happens, we're looking for who to blame. I
Right.
mean, that happens on every level.
Yep, I agree.
So when a child does something that should be disciplined, we're looking for someone else to blame. In many cases, as parents, it's because we don't want to accept the fact that we maybe should be parenting in a different way or maybe more engaged or something with our kid, right? But we often do not put responsibility on the child. And this is not serving them well. So we put very little responsibility on the kids, and we're looking for who's the coach or the teacher or the parent or whoever it might be that we can blame for this child's, misbehavior or failure to succeed or whatever it might be. So I do think this is where we need to really be reflective, whether we're a parent or a teacher or a coach or whatever, on how can we really give kids appropriate levels of responsibility and then hold them accountable, which is going to help them succeed long term.
Absolutely. I remember in high school, the dean at our school personally knew a large population of the students, not because they were misbehaved, but because she felt like having those connections with the families would be beneficial when it came time to face some of these.
Yes, and so let's tie that in because we were going to talk about the
Yeah.
role of fathers. That was kind of where we initially, start talking. And I think this ties into this educational piece and our involvement as parents. So I just want to read a couple of quick statistics. One is from the book, The Importance of Fathers in Healthy Development of Children. And in that book, Rosenberg and Wilcox explain that involved fatherhood is linked to better outcomes on nearly every measure of child well-being, from cognitive development and educational achievement to self-esteem and pro-social behavior. Children who grow up with involved fathers are 39% more likely to earn A's in school, 45% less likely to repeat a grade, 60% less less likely to be suspended or expelled from school, twice as likely to go to college and find stable employment after high school, 75% less likely to have a teen birth, and 80% less likely to spend time in jail. I mean, these numbers are staggering. They communicate that fathers matter, and we'll talk to mothers matter, right? Grandparents matter. Adults who are involved in kids' lives matter, and the impact that us being involved intentionally in our kids' lives is critical right now. Part of that is because we're seeing this increase in anxiety, depression, loneliness, all of those things with the next generation. But second of all, because the United States is right now facing a really unique situation where almost 1 out of 4 kids in our country is growing up in a single parent home,
Right.
which compared to the global average, which is 7%, is staggering. So in America, almost 3 times the number of kids are growing up in single parent homes. The other thing that's interesting about that statistic is the fact that in many other countries, I mean, I grew up in Mexico, and often you have grandparents living with families, you have cousins or aunts or uncles. So even if mom and dad are very busy with work or whatever, there are other adults around who are supporting, modeling, guiding those kids, right? Whereas in America, because we do have more resources, we don't all have to live together in one place most of the time. So we can have our own house. And often you'll have kids with one parent who's very busy and doesn't have time to provide emotional support. Or maybe you might even have 2 parents who are very emotionally disengaged because they're working a lot. Or the reality is today we're seeing a lot of emotional abandonment because parents are distracted by their technology as well. So whether that's work, texting, and emailing, or social media taking our time. But to come back to this dynamic of, many of the kids who are growing up in single parent homes are growing up in homes without fathers. We live in a military community, so both Kayla and I are married to military men, and often dads are gone for a long period of time. Here's the good news, though. It's not quantity of time that makes so much of a difference as quality of time.
Right.
So the quality of the time that we're spending with our kids. So even if a dad is deployed or he's out in the field a lot or he's TDY or whatever the case might be,
Right.
if dad, when he is home, is emotionally engaged with the child, if mom, when she's home, is emotionally engaged, if grandma and grandpa, when they're around, are not on their phones because it's not just the younger generation, but we're making eye contact, we're asking open-ended questions, we're engaging. The impact on some of these other trends that we're seeing with the next generation that can be detrimental is mitigated in many, many ways. So I think really that we just need to recognize fathers matter, mothers matter, involved adults matter, emotionally engaged adults matter.
It sounds to me like what you're saying is good relationships matter.
It is,
because
yes.
without good relationships, which sometimes stem from a disappointed result or an expectation or an entitlement. I keep going back to
Yes,
that word.
true.
People expect so much, and if they don't get what they think they're entitled to, they're not happy, and they're
Yes.
disengaged, and the children suffer.
Yes. So, Kayla, I'd be curious, just because you're a mom with young children, what do you see as some of the challenges today, just as we're raising kids, and really engaging emotionally with our kids?
I would say number 1 is the technology. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's not so much because maybe you at home have allowed it, but again, it's their peers are doing it. And, it's just natural for children to want to fit in and
Yes.
not to be different. So I would say that would be, for me, the biggest challenge. Secondly, being a military family.
Yeah.
It would be when my husband is gone, I really like to try to find a male figure for him
Yeah.
to fill in when he can, whether it be grandpa or his cousins or something like that. I think it makes a big difference to just have that male
Yes.
connection,
It does.
even just to roughhouse a little bit.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, and that's what the research shows for kids who do grow up without fathers or where fathers might be gone for a period of time, to have other role models who are going to be around, hang out. I mean, this can even be just, so I would just encourage maybe anyone in the listening audience, if you have a neighbor kid and you know that their dad's deployed, go out and throw the ball around with them a little bit, or just go out and talk to them for a few minutes. You know, just, it doesn't, and here's the beautiful thing with kids and young people is it doesn't take a lot. It's not like we have to sit and talk to them for 3 hours, you know, and have a series. It can be just chit-chatting while you're doing something else, working in the garden or going for a bike ride.
Right.
And so just seizing those opportunities, whereas today I think even the danger with technology is not just kids are on their phones, but when we have a moment, like I just think about in the car, right? When we're at a stoplight or when we're driving in the car, you know, often mom, even if she's in the passenger seat, is scrolling social media, or the kids are watching a movie. Instead of that is the prime time to have a conversation, right? So I just see how technology comes in and captures those small moments that are so critical to relationship development, where it's just like, because the kids are not watching a movie, they're gazing out the window, they're thinking about something. Kids articulate what they're thinking about, and suddenly you're having a conversation where you're laying the foundation of trust, of communication, so that when they're teenagers and when they're young adults, you've laid the foundation for those things to happen in your family or just in your community. And often we're just filling all those spaces today with technology, regardless of our age.
Yeah. Want to come back in the third set. Want to speak to you about the high rate of divorce in the military. Also compared to what it was 20, 30 years ago, because that's creating issues as we move forward. Our guest is Dr. Jolene Erlocker. Leading Tomorrow is her company, and her role and her vision in leadership development is the topic of conversation. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our final set of All Things Moore County. Speaking with Dr. Jolene Erlocker, talking about strategies, living strategies, challenges faced by parents, teachers, trying to make lives for our children as good and comfortable and empowering as possible. And it's a challenge. The divorce rate is... As a layman, I sit back and I see, I mean, in our business, in real estate, divorces are one of the major reasons why we put homes on the market for sale. People who don't talk to each other, they have children. And so that's, and single parent families and all the issues.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would just encourage parents, and this would be true for grandparents and other adults as well, is to really reflect on our own use of technology. I know a few years ago, my husband and I, we realized all of a sudden that we were both on our devices at night.
Right.
We would go to bed with our devices, scrolling our news feeds, our social media feeds, and we were staying up later. We were not getting good sleep. We were not communicating. And all of a sudden we were like, what are we doing?
Right.
And so we made a rule in our house, no devices in bedrooms for mom, dad, or kids. And it has changed the culture of our home, because my husband and I, we actually talk to each other at night, right? We talk to our kids at night. And it just has strengthened our relationship in so many ways. So I really encourage you, commonsensemedia.org and healthychildren.org are two great websites where if you just search family media plan, it will take you to a template where you can really create a media plan for your family. So we have several things in our family that we have implemented. One of them is no phones in the bedroom, but there's several other things we've implemented. That's a great first step to preserving and strengthening your marriage.
Right.
But also strengthening your relationship with your kids. And the interesting thing is we don't realize how much we're modeling for our kids all the time.
Yeah.
If they don't see mom and dad talking,
Right.
they don't see adults working through conflict in healthy ways, if they don't see us resolving issues together, making compromises to be a family, and maybe not always getting exactly what I want because I love someone else and I'm going to prioritize their needs, it becomes really difficult for them to do that. So for all our devices, we're not modeling those things, and we're not always strengthening our own communication. So that's one thing that I would really just encourage people to consider.
Right.
The second thing, and maybe Kayla, you could talk to this as well as a military spouse, and I think just all moms, right? We can get into our routine. My husband's in the field right now. When he's gone, the girls and I have a routine. It just works like clockwork. I don't have another adult who has opinions about how the house should run, where the dishes should be stacked, whatever it might be. And sometimes when my husband comes back from the field, there's an adjustment period where I have to be, okay, just letting it go. If the kids miss soccer practice, or if the dishes are stacked up in the sink, or we're off our routine, guess what? Time with dad is so critical. And instead of giving him my honey to-do list when he walks in the door, being okay if he literally just sits and plays games with the kids, or goes and takes a soccer ball and kicks it around with them, right? So there's a part of it, I don't know, Kayla, would you add anything to just, I think as moms, as spouses, to really facilitate that time with dads and to value it is really critical.
Absolutely. I think that is huge. And I think that we're very lucky that our husbands have a job that allows them to do that. Specifically, when my husband comes back from long trips, they allow us a period of time to kind of go through that transition, and it's very important. And it also allows, I feel like, me the opportunity to really step back from what I was doing and reset my mind and get myself back in the role of a wife and a mother, because I think that not just from their coming home, the male perspective, from mine, I am constantly in control of those things, and I have to remember as well that I don't need to be. And just taking a step back also for myself is huge.
I think that's such a great observation, because as moms, we feel responsible to keep everything moving and to just let go and really say what's most important, I think can be really, really hard. I think the other thing is that in our culture today, there can kind of be a negative portrayal of dads or men sometimes, and some of the shows that I see my kids watching and stuff. And I think as a woman, as a mom, I need to communicate respect for my husband, even if he's frustrating me with something that he's doing because we haven't been together for a little while, and I have to readjust myself, to really make sure how we're communicates respect, the things that we want our kids to model in all of their relationships.
I think everyone really needs to show, there's a lot of grace to show one another when you come back into those situations, and you have to really remove the judgment. And it's really just like a reset entirely.
Yep, it is.
Is it fair to say that a military marriage, there are more pressures than there are, because there are so many adjustments that need to be made and shifts?
There are, but at the same time, I find it's full of opportunities as well. Because I think it's easy for couples who maybe you just have your normal routine all the time, every day for years. There's not a lot of disruption. You can get into ruts very easily. I think being in a military marriage requires so much communication that if we engage it, even when it's difficult, we can actually strengthen our marriage, because we have all of these disruptions that force us to reflect and to talk and to communicate and to, like you said, Kayla, reset things, even as a family, and to say what was healthy about what we were doing, what's not. And you can really reestablish new habits, I think, with some of those disruptions, whether it's a deployment or even getting out of the military can be another time when there's a transition from military life to civilian life, reestablishing what's priorities. So, Do
you remember as a child when your parents were having a fight, you thought it was your fault? Children feel like if there's tension, it's something they did. And if parents could stop today and just think about that. I mean, was that your recollection as a child? Like, what did I do wrong? Why are they mad at each other?
It was, and I think it really comes back to the communication piece. I mean, I find when my husband and I are working through something, a disagreement, if you're familiar with the Enneagram, I'm a 3 and he's an 8, so our disagreements are very boisterous. And we often will pause even as we're having a discussion and turn to the kids and say, Mommy and Daddy love each other. We're working through something that we don't disagree with, but we love each other. We love you. And this is something that's going to help us, do something better, whatever we're talking about. So even articulating those things to kids.
You reset the table.
Absolutely. Even if it's after the fight and the things have ended and things are settling back down, just making sure that for me, growing up, the most important thing I remember about my parents fighting is they also made sure that we saw them make up.
Yes. My daughters call it, here comes the romantic scene sometimes, right? They've said that because if we model that you can have a conflict, you can fight, but there is restoration, reconciliation, forgiveness, whatever you might want to say. We model the whole healthy spectrum of what conflict can look like. So I love that. Yeah. The making up part is important.
So many of the topics that you bring up are would gravitate towards a town hall type meeting where people would engage in conversation, because these conversations, I don't know that they're had in large groups, because people share the same issues, but they may not share them with one another.
Yeah. I think just if, I've done like FRG, events for like the military for family readiness groups, or just parent groups with local school districts or churches that host parent events. And I think if you're a leader out there who is kind of working with a group of parents in some way to create space for parents to have these kinds of conversations, I've seen the value of that just in ones that I've been a part of, where there's time for mom and dad to actually have some of these conversations, to think about, just pause and just reflect, because I think it's hard in the midst of our busy lives to actually do that,
Yeah, I think setting the stage for those conversations is really important from my perspective, because there is a fear of that vulnerability. So if I'm the first to step out on that ledge, I'm fearing that judgment, because like we talked about earlier, it's coming from everywhere. Yeah. But if there is a platform for me and others to come, and you feel like there's that solidarity, you're going to get more from it.
Relationships aren't easy.
No.
It's not like what Hollywood tells you. It's a wonderful life and you live happily ever after. And unfortunately, the way we're raised, what we think, girls more than boys, I think, right? Their romantic notions about what is it that's going to make them happy. Yeah. The reality is that's just not what it is.
Yeah.
I think I call that the fairy tale mentality. And I think it's very sad. And we've raised our kids on these stories and that's just not the reality of things. And I feel like we need to start presenting our youth with some more realistic role models.
Jolene, thank you. Yeah, you never disappoint when you come in. Always a refreshing perspective, and you make me think about a lot of people that I know in my past growing up. And as you're speaking, you will raise awareness for people, and that's a very good thing. If people want to reach out to your website, to you, you do public speaking, how would they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so my website's Leading Tomorrow, so the word's leadingtomorrow.org. Right. I also have a podcast, the Leading Tomorrow podcast. We talked just this month about the impact of fatherlessness. I had a guest who grew up without a father, and he just shares, what's important in a community for him. So there's information there. Of course, I'm on social media as well, Instagram and Facebook at leadingtomorrow.org. So yeah. And I guess one final thing, and just your point about relationships, Bill, I would just encourage people is to just take advantage of every opportunity to engage in relationship. Right. Emotional connection is made when we make eye contact for 60 to 70% of a conversation. So just even looking a kid in the grocery store in the eyes and saying, hey.
I agree with her. I agree with you so much. You can't. Some of these kids don't make eye contact. Yeah. They're so used to looking away and looking at their phones. And if eyeball to eyeball, it's old school, but you know what? You connect.
So important.
And you feel it inside.
Yep. And we can do it anywhere at any time. Yeah. So just look for those opportunities throughout your day to just look someone in the eyes as you're having a conversation with them.
Yeah, that's a great way to end the show. Kayla, thanks for coming and joining us as usual. Always, it's always a positive when you're around. And thanks for the shares. Dr. Erlacher, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm so glad to have met your two daughters. I want to see them at the pool.
Okay, sounds good.
This is All Things Moore County. Have a great week.